This next book is called Edgar Allan Poe's Snifter of Terror. A snifter is the name of that nifty brandy glass that you see Edgar Allan Poe has on the cover. This is from AHOY Comics, brand new #1. AHOY's a new comic publisher. They only have 4 comic series out right now. There's High Heaven, The Wrong Earth, Captain Ginger, and this book. Now, this book, it seems like it's kind of a horror anthology type book. They marketed it as a combination of drunk history and tales from the Crypt Keeper, and I guess each issue is going to be small self-contained stories. So when this book starts out, it's Edgar Allan Poe, it's 3 pages of Edgar Allan Poe, and he's drunk out of his mind, and there's just snot and stuff coming out of him, and he's kind of playing the part of the Crypt Keeper, the guy that's going to introduce the stories that we are going to hear. So he's monologuing right to the reader in these first 3 pages. There's some funny parts there. And then we go into our first story, and that one is called The Facts in the Case of M. Valdemar. And it was written by Tom Peyer, art by Fred Harper. Tom Peyer is the guy that wrote the High Heaven book from AHOY Comics that I've been really liking. Watch my video reviews on that. So I was pretty excited to see what he would do. So his story is about a chef who's a famous chef in Europe, but he kind of has this mucus problem where he is like spitting and spewing out stuff out of his mouth, and he's kind of been laughed out of Europe, and he can't be a pastry chef in Europe anymore. So he decides to start brand new in America. He moves to Washington, D.C., where he opens up a restaurant, and all of a sudden the word of mouth starts spreading, and the president of the United States wants this pastry chef to come cook for him and do a banquet. So this pastry chef, he says, like, this is finally his moment to shine. But the problem is he's still spewing stuff out of his mouth all the time. So he kind of finds this hypnotist, and this hypnotist is able to just like put him in this trance where all that mucus and gross stuff will sort of not be coming out and will kind of just burrow itself inside of him. So this works, and he is a great success. But all this mucus building up eventually is going to lead to this guy's death, and his doctor is even said as such that at a certain date and time he will not live anymore. But our pastry chef goes back to this hypnotist, and the hypnotist says that he can prolong this guy's life. He can sort of put him in a trance, and this trance is put on the pastry chef at the exact moment of his death and kind of stops that death process from happening. Several months go by, but this pastry chef is just getting more sick and disgusting looking, and his pores start dripping ooze, and eventually he has a new job opportunity, and the Queen of England is coming to America, and the vice president wants to hold a banquet and have the Queen over and have this pastry chef cook. But this pastry chef at this point, it's too much. He's been alive for 7 months longer than he's supposed to be, and all that ooze inside of him is just building up, and he's finally at this banquet for the Queen, and he just explodes into a mess, and his guts and stuff get everywhere, and that's how this first story ends. What's funny is that apparently, even though he exploded and his blood and guts are everywhere, they say that it tasted very good and it went well with the pastries. Now, this first story was okay. I would give it a 7.5 out of 10. But there is a second story, because this is an anthology book, so there's 2 stories in here. And the next one is a 14-page story written by Mark Russell, one of my favorite writers. Some of you might know him from his Flintstones run, so he's very good at social satire. And the story he decides to do, it's sort of this Count Chocula ripoff character called Marquis Coco. And you even see that there is a cereal box of that particular character. So the storyline for this one is that this the Coco guy, basically Count Chocula. He has a beautiful wife, and he holds these elaborate breakfast celebrations for everybody because he wants to avoid that suspicion that people think that he's a vampire. So what better way to do that than to invite everyone for weekly or daily breakfast routines where he has all of these sophisticated people come visit him, and he holds this breakfast celebration. Now, he sits at a specific part on the table because he is in fact a vampire, but he's trying to trick everybody to not think he's a vampire because why else would he hold a breakfast celebration? But there's lots of interesting characters. Lots of them, you can tell they're stand-ins for other cereal box characters. So we have Captain Crunch, the Lucky Charms guy, and these three people that I'm pretty sure are Snap, Crackle, and Pop. So I thought it was just really funny seeing all these little Easter eggs of all these other characters. So this breakfast celebration is going on, and then we're introduced to the enemy character named Duke L'Orange, and he has a thing for Count Chocula guy's wife, and he tells her that, like, why don't you leave this guy and come join me? But she is not interested. And as the breakfast celebration is winding down, everybody is leaving, but the Duke L'Orange, who is totally on to Count Chocula, and he knows that he's a vampire, and he will die if this breakfast celebration continues because the sunlight is continuing to work its way up the table. So he sort of says, like, no, I'm not leaving. I haven't even ate my breakfast yet. I'm going to keep eating it. And then Count Chocula's wife, in order to save him, says that she'll run away with this Duke L'Orange guy if he leaves right now, and she can get her husband to the safety away from the sunlight. The Duke L'Orange agrees. The vampire Count Chocula goes back to his lair, and now the wife has to fulfill her promise and go meet the Duke later on in the day, but they've decided in a twist ending that she has become a vampire now herself. Then the wife kills this Duke L'Orange, and she gets to live happily ever after with her husband, and they continue to do these breakfast celebrations. So yeah, that's the story in this, and I thought it was really fun. It was such a unique tale, and I also love the parroting of cereal box characters thrown into this story. Several years ago, when I was in university, I actually interned at Kellogg's, the cereal company, so I've always been very fascinated with cereal and cereal advertising and all of these silly characters that cereal companies have, and seeing this story with a whole bunch of them thrown in there, I thought was really fun and really interesting. And I'm a big Mark Russell fan, so I of course like this. So I would give this part of the story a 9.5 out of 10. I really liked it, and I think that this horror anthology book seems like a really interesting premise. The stories are kind of horror based, but they're also very funny, and I love good humor in comics. So I do recommend this series. I think you should all check it out.